residents in North Adelaide have reported seeing Nazi symbol stickers plastered on several structures around the suburb. One of the stickers is attached to a traffic light opposite North Adelaide Primary School there on Tint Street. One of our producers drove past a little earlier, about an hour ago, and it is still there. Joining us is the chairman of the Anti-Defamation Commission, Dr. Dvir Abramovich. Good afternoon, Doctor. Great to have you on the program.
Good to be with you. Please call me Dvir.
Oh, thank you, Dvir. Now, well, a sticker won't hurt anyone. It's what it stands for that really hurts, isn't it?
It is, and look, there's no excuse to dismiss this evolving security risk that is materializing before our very eyes. Here in Victoria, we've experienced an epidemic of Nazi vandalism and swastikas. And we have to remember who we are talking about. We are talking about homegrown extremists, domestic terrorists in waiting. And they're ticking time bombs, and they're a clear and present danger. And the bottom line is that ignoring the threat that they pose will cost us lives. These are individuals with hatred in their hearts. You know, they dream of an Aryan Australia with an Australian Hitler. And they would easily exterminate anybody who doesn't fit into their evil ideology, you know, whether it's Jews, Muslims, Indigenous Australians, the disabled, immigrants, members of the LGBTIQ plus community, anyone they deem inferior. And as I've said before, we don't need a Christchurch in Adelaide before we act.
When you mentioned security concerns, there are a local homegrown terrorist and the hatred of all those groups that you just mentioned. This is disgusting.
Well, the bottom line is that as the horrific atrocities in Christchurch, but also in other cities around the world have clearly demonstrated, there is a direct linkage between hateful words, Nazi vandalism, conspiratorial ideas and incitement, and lone wolf shooting incidents. I mean, we know one thing, where white supremacists come together, physical assaults and murder are usually not far behind. And I think the problem here is that you can have followers who are absorbing the violent, poisonous messages that these movements are promoting, and they will find reinforcement and approval for their beliefs, and they may reach the decision that any action is justified to help save the white race from their enemies. So we know that at any point, this hateful rhetoric that these individuals are spewing can cross the line into real-world lethal attacks.
I've been told on very good authority that there is an Adelaide white supremacist group who organises sticker events in the middle of the night. Is this a bigger problem than what authorities think?
For years now that this is the time to designate these movements as terrorist organizations, as Canada and other countries have done, because what this would do is to bring the full weight of our law enforcement resources in tearing this threat at its root. And I want your listeners to remember one thing. Before he committed the atrocities, Brenton Tarrant self-radicalized online, but he also wanted to join one of the local neo-Nazi movements, the National Socialist Network, which is based in Melbourne. And we know that these groups are on a recruitment campaign. They're agitating for a racial war. They're looking to recruit like-minded bigots. And the bottom line is that they are dangerous. And even though some may wish to dismiss this as simply stickering of Nazi swastikas, we have to be very much mindful of the risk and the danger that they pose.
So by posting one of these stickers, is it purely walking down the street and wanting their symbols around, or is it a call for arms? Does it mean more than just putting a sticker somewhere?
There are various purposes here. One is to sow fear. One is to harass. It's really a terror campaign. It's to make people afraid, because we have to remember what the Nazi swastika represents. It represents the gassing of mothers and children in the gas chambers. It represents the shooting of families in open fields. It represents the murdering of the disabled. This is an evil ideology. I mean, these individuals are trying to keep Hitler's legacy alive here in Australia. And they're about an exterminist policy. And they are very dangerous, and we know that often they glorify so-called martyrs. These are individuals who went into churches or into mosques or into synagogues and committed atrocities. So they are very, very dangerous. I mean, I don't want to scare your listeners, But I think this is a problem from hell that we can't hide or run away from.
If caught, what would you like to see happen to the person or persons involved?
Well, I think this is simply a symptom of a bigger problem. I think the first step is that the government and the opposition and the parliament needs to pass the law to ban the public displays of the Nazi swastika. I think, this is very, very important because what it does, of course, is that it honors the sacred values and our common humanity, but it's also a tribute to our brave diggers who fought to defeat Hitler and gave their lives. And, of course, the 6 million of victims, Jewish victims murdered by the Third Reich and others. The other thing is that law enforcement needs to pool all of its resources. I mean, the director of ASIO, Burgess, has time and again over the last few years identified neo-Nazis and white supremacists as a national threat. So this is really the time. This is a whole of society challenge, and each one of us needs to push our elected representatives to do more.
How are they recruiting and who are they targeting?
Well, what we've seen over the last 2.5 years is that they've used the societal crisis, the economic crisis, the health crisis of COVID to appeal to those impulses that usually lurk at the base of people's souls. And what they've done is to traffic in conspiracies, saying that COVID is a global attempt by Jews or by Asians or by other minorities to eliminate the white race. But they've also used anti-vax, anti-lockdown groups to try and promote and to hijack those groups in order to promote their agenda. And that's their plan, is to normalize these very dangerous, bizarre, deranged ideas to try and find a scapegoat. And let's remember one thing, that even though at the core of Nazi ideology is anti-Semitism, I mean, Hitler was an anti-Semite before he became a final solutionist. But within Nazi ideology, anybody who they deem as different is going to be killed, is going to be exterminated. And that's why I say that these are domestic terrorists in waiting. They're ticking time bombs, and they're a clear and present danger.
You've been spearheading a 5-year campaign to ban the symbol in Victoria. It has now happened, and hopefully other states do follow. One Nation Senator Sarah Game introduced a legislation in SA Parliament here last month, which would make public display of the Nazi swastika illegal in South Australia. What does that mean to you? I mean, 5 years is a very long time. It's a symbolic move, but does it drive this group underground even further?
No, it doesn't. I mean, it's a tremendous blow to those forces of evil. And it sends a very clear message. I think it sends actually two messages. The first one is that a democracy is not just about the rights that we have. It's also about what we're willing to tolerate. And a nation that is willing to tolerate the flying of the Nazi flag or people walking around with the Nazi swastika armband has to do some soul searching. But I think the most paramount message that it sends to those neo-Nazis, to those hardcore bigots, is that the law is no longer on your side. Hatred and intolerance and prejudice will never find a refuge in Adelaide, in South Australia. And it will also, I think, show that at a time when our politics are sharply polarized, we can come together across our differences to stand for justice, for dignity, and for equality. And yes, we are confronting the deep stain of resurgent white supremacist movement. But I think this law that will be passed by the Parliament, I hope, will declare in a very strong and united voice that the Australian people, the Australian nation, will never tolerate the ideology of extermination and the ideology of Nazism.
There seems to be somewhat of a rise in these groups now. I don't know whether that's because they're being called out and it's in the media and we're not afraid to talk about this anymore and everyone feels most people feel quite passionate about doing something about it. Or is it the fact that they are on the rise, or has it always been bubbling away?
They've always lurked on the fringes. About 10, 15 years ago, the neo-Nazis got the greatest gift they could ever hope for. And that's the internet, social media. Now, every bigot has a megaphone, has a platform, and they can disseminate their poisonous ideology instantaneously, inexpensively, and anonymously. And make no mistake, they're very tech-savvy. They're very sophisticated in weaponizing social media, the internet, chat groups like Telegram and Parler, to attract new followers to their wont cause. So it's not that we are talking about this. Putting on the blinders and pretending that it's not happening is not going to solve this crisis that we are facing. We need to have a conversation in the public square. We need to educate the public. And I've always believed that a conscientious community will give you the tick if you don't sugarcoat things, if you tell them the truth, and that's what I'm about.
You said it's a crisis. Is that where we're at?
I think we're certainly at a crisis. I mean, we are seeing bigotry, we are seeing racism infect every societal aspect of our lives, whether it is in schools, whether it is in the workplace, whether it is in the streets. Over the last 5 to 6 years, we've had an explosion in anti-Semitism, the likes that we've never seen. And all these feed into each other. And again, we monitor these extremists. We are following what they're doing, and they are very determined to take their online activities into the real world. And, again, we don't need to have a mass shooting in any of our capital cities to take this problem very, very seriously.
Dvir, thank you so much for your time.
Appreciate the opportunity. Take care.
Thank you.